Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. I'm absolutely thrilled to have back with me Phil Taylor and Abby Filyaw from the San Antonio Council on Drug and Alcohol Awareness Hill Country Branch. Guys, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Nothing more than I love talking about recovery. So I wanted to maybe start with we've had the opportunity to visit one time previously, but maybe take a step back and talk a little bit more about alcohol and alcohol abuse and alcohol recovery in the Hill Country. Where would you assess where we are in 2025?
As a recovery coach, person with lived experience, person in recovery living here for the past couple of years and working in the field, alcohol is still the number one cause of concern. It's the number one substance that we see the most coming through our office. So there's more that needs to be done in terms of prevention, I think, education, and recovery support services.
I grew up in an era when the legal drinking age was 18.
Me too.
It's not the same now. But where do you see, or do you still see, or what's not still, do you see a problem with teenagers younger than the drinking age starting either alcohol abuse in high school or perhaps starting to drink and binge drinking, which could lead to full blown alcoholism? Is that still a problem?
Definitely. And that's one of the reasons, Tom, why we stress and try to promote prevention. Because the longer you can push back that young person's first interaction with alcohol, the higher the possibility that they won't develop a substance use disorder later in life. One of the big factors for developing a problem later is that person having an early encounter with alcohol or drugs. Prevention is so important. The whole spectrum is critical, but prevention, if we can catch it on the front end, then we can reduce so much heartache later in life.
As a member of the local recovery community, obviously there's several recovery centers or rehabilitation centers in and around Kerrville. And there's, at least in my world, a fair number of people who have been through one program all the way from a 12-step program to full blown rehabilitation. But it seems to me there's a lot of support for people in recovery who have gone through one of those programs. Would that be a fair assessment from you all's opinion?
Definitely.
Yeah. This is a recovery town. And I think that because there are so many treatment centers in the area, there's so much supportive housing for people coming out of those treatment centers. And recovery is really normalized here. I lived in LA for 10 years and Nashville for 3. And I think substance use is really normalized in those places. It is in most places, I think. But recovery is really normalized here in Kerrville. And that makes it a really unique and special place.
I'm in AA, but there's other forms of recovery, or rather, I should say, recovery for other substances. There's NA, there's CA, there's GA, a lot of other types of programs. Uh, do you see that same sort of support for non alcohol addictive drugs as well?
I do. I think that what we're working towards and what SAMHSA has been educating us on is person centered care. So, whatever the person's goals are, just supporting those. And that's like a big deal with peer support. And what I've been taught is I can't tell anyone, and it doesn't really help the other person for me to tell them the right or wrong way to get into recovery. SAMHSA defines it as a process of change through which individuals move toward their goals, move toward health, and become self sufficient and live a self directed life. And that's like a way different, broader definition than using or not using, drinking or not drinking. And I think it kind of opens people's worlds to like, oh, it's okay. I can just it's not so black and white, and I think it's allowing more people to feel open enough to start sharing about what they're struggling with. I remember in the beginning, before I became fully abstinent, the idea of harm reduction seemed less scary to me. Maybe I could just cut down seemed a little easier than giving up everything for the rest of my life. So that's we're opening some more doors, I think, just by allowing people to set their own goals. And that's our job is to help them reach whatever they want. And that's kind of the an overview of person-centered care. But yes, I think there's a type of recovery for anyone at any stage of their recovery. So I'm grateful to at least be a part of that new kind of movement in the peer support world. So I think that's where peer support differs from the 12-step model. But I think it's positive. And when people want to move toward total abstinence, we're able to help them do that. And we're able to help them get into whatever room they want to be in.
What about the issue of mental health? How do you have the conversation with someone who may be willing to consider stopping whatever they're putting in their body, but they don't connect it with any either mental health issues or even emotional health issues?
We found the research shows that a person that is struggling with mental health issues, they're at a much higher risk to develop an SUD as well. And so we really see a lot of co-occurring individuals where you see mental health issues as well as substance use issues. And so we have to have relationships with other organizations that work with mental health. We have a good relationship with MHTD. We work with them. They're a part of our consortium, and so we'll refer to them. Other times they'll refer to us. So it's important to have those relationships in place so that we can, when we see that is also an issue or suspect that it might be, that we can make sure that we get them the services that they help. And I wanted to add one thing that Abby kind of touched on a little bit. I just wanted to expound on it. One of the things that we at Cicada support is many pathways to recovery. And so where traditionally there has been very limited pathways that have been recognized, we now recognize, as Abby said, any pathway that is taking you where you need to be in your recovery, no matter what that looks like. And what may work for me might not work for you, or vice versa. And so we find where that person's at, attempt to find where that person's at, and then work with them to get them into the type of recovery that they can be successful at. And for my personal recovery, it was faith based and had nothing to do. I knew nothing about AA or NA except the names years ago, back in the early 80s. But I found my pathway to recovery through my faith. And so that won't work for some people. But what we do recognize it and support that and encourage it and try to be there for whatever pathway someone wants to take to get to a place of wholeness in their life.
Let me pick up on something you alluded to, Phil, which is you talked about the relationship you have with other healthcare and health service providers. And I wanted to expand on that because the last time you all were here, we were talking about different drug and different set of problems. But part of the healthcare service in this space starts with the frontline EMS or first responders. It certainly
Yes.
goes to the hospitals.
Yeah.
Certainly goes to people like yourself. It can go to our mental health advocates. Could you really spend a little bit of time talking about this network of healthcare providers and service providers who are helping to fight all of this and how you work with them all?
Yes. You use the word network. And so we get the idea of a net. And so by having these relationships in place with these different organizations, like we work with the EMS, for instance, we did a training for the EMS trainer so that they can now train their staff. And it's critical to have these relationships, and they have to be. We were talking with someone yesterday in a Teams meeting, and he was asking us, how do you get people to come together? He's with another organization that works under a different grant. And he was asking Abby and me, he said, how do you do this? And I said, it's not about two organizations, it's about two individuals. So it's the relationship that we establish and we build with another person that brings together these services. And so without that, we don't, you have a very network. And so we work to establish friendships and rapport with across the board, with EMS, with fire, with law enforcement, with healthcare, with the various counseling services that are here locally and the mental health authority and places like that. So it's just critical to be able to put a face with. I don't feel like I've established a good relationship with someone until I've got their cell phone number in my cell phone. And we should have the relationship so we can just shoot somebody a text, hey, I've got this going on. And so you cut through all of the bureaucracy and have that one-on-one interaction. And the result of that is you're able to be effective in helping the people that we're here to help.
I mean, let me take that one-on-one interaction in a very different direction and ask you, as our representative female on the panel,
Okay.
how do you have a conversation with a teenage girl who may be dabbling, who may be experimenting, but you can see with a couple more bad decisions, you could go down a very difficult path? And I say that because my experience told me I wasn't ready till I was ready. And when I was ready, I heard it. When I wasn't ready, I didn't hear it. And there wasn't much difference really between being ready and not ready in terms of my consumption at that point in my life. How can you have that, or can you have a conversation with someone who may not be ready, or is that still sort of the bellwether?
That's a really good question. I'm particularly passionate about young adult females because I was one at one point. And so I'm grateful as a recovery coach, as a peer support person, that I get to share my lived experience. As a counselor, we don't get to do that as much, but as a peer recovery support specialist, you can tell someone a little bit about what you went through. And we can also just listen. I think that's probably the most effective is it's never usually about the substance that they're consuming. It's about why they're leaning on that, maybe more than they could or should have to. So I think addressing those risk factors in the community, when we talk about prevention, we have risk factors and we have protective factors. So the more protective factors we can put around a young adult, the more support, the more non judgmental kind of peer support, peer to peer communication we can have can really change somebody's life. I think when just one person cares enough about you and tells you as much, that can change your whole life. When a kid feels alone, maybe, or unseen, unheard, suffering in some type of way for whatever reason, it can be a lot easier to slink away and hide and use substances just to cope. But when somebody is just like, "Hey, how are you? Let's talk about whatever you wanna talk about, because 'cause I'm just here for it. And if you wanna talk about your substance use, let's probably do let's do that." But really underneath that, it's finding out what's going on with this person and how can we address the risk factors in their life to maybe put some more protection around them and boost positive experiences. They say that positive experiences with friends, family, community support, church support, like whatever this kid is into, let's encourage them to do that. Let's look at the strengths-based approach. What are they doing well? And let's get them excited about motivation and, like, what is their reason? What makes them smile? What makes them happy? Encouraging those things is really, really, I think, more effective than the, "Don't go down this road. Look what happened to me." You know what I mean? We don't wanna scare them, but we do wanna make them excited about life and encourage them because I think life as a teenager is really hard, just emotionally, hormonally, all that stuff. Finding ways for them to get regulated, whether that's physical exercise, dance class, whatever, I think can really help. Building somebody's recovery capital looks different for everybody. We may need to get someone some stable housing. We may could send them to like an Enhanced Horizons or Hill Country Youth Ranch or some supportive place. We may need to get them into some counseling, into some after school clubs. But just finding out what they're into and capitalizing on those strengths, I think can really be effective.
Phil, let me ask you a series of questions along those lines. And I don't know if it's tougher or easier because I'm going to ask you now, what do you tell a group of teenagers? What do you tell if you're asked to come speak to a high school or church group or whatever group it may be? How do you communicate to them drugs, but also alcohol, the dangers of both?
I've had to work with obviously different ages. And of course, it depends, Tom, on the age that you're dealing with. The older they are, the more that you can just be more black and white and tell them, talk about the drugs and about the issues that are developed in a person that uses them. But with the younger children, our approach is to help build their self esteem, help them to feel good about themselves, as Abby's talking about. We focus on that, on building the capabilities to resist peer pressure and to be able to say no. We know historically that just telling them to say no, as we grew up with in the 80s, wasn't very effective. And we have to work with those children with age appropriate curriculum and with evidence based curriculum. And evidence based curriculum is curriculum that has been put together from material that has been proven that percentage wise, once this material is taught, we see this much of an improvement. And so it can be quantified with numbers. And so rather than just trying to give them a pep talk. And so it's very well crafted and very, very well put together for each age group. And what I have found is working with older teenagers, information is very powerful. They're not going to listen to you and receive very well when you just tell them this is bad, don't do this. It's going to be bad for you. But if you just give them information, let them make up their own mind. This is what happens. This is what happens to the brain when you ingest this. If you do it for a long enough period, your brain is going to be rewired and it's going to be altered and changed. And so we lay that information out there and then give them alternatives and then let them make up their own mind. And that's more effective than trying to beat them over the head with the, you shouldn't be doing this, because as we found out, that doesn't work very well.
Abby, you brought along something I was not aware of, which is the Recovery Bill of Rights.
Isn't that exciting? I wasn't aware of it until very recently. And we talk about some of this in recovery coach training, but Faces and Voices of Recovery has put this together. And basically, it's the right to dignity and respect. I think people in recovery, people still in their substance use, encounter a lot of stigma, which causes shame. And that can be a really big barrier to people seeking treatment. So, to remember that we're valuable as people first, right? People first. People with the substance use disorder, people with a medical condition, we can just put that aside because everyone, I think, has the right to dignity and respect. And mental health has actually done a really good job of addressing this and organizing. And it's been harder, I think, for recovery people to get organized and come together and get loud and proud about their recovery just because of this stigma. So I bring along the Recovery Bill of Rights just to tell everyone that there is one and that they can go look it up for themselves and just know that wherever you're seeking treatment, wherever you go, whether if it's the hospital, whether it's your doctor for a regular checkup, just because you've used substances, and even if you've used substances in a harmful way, it doesn't make you less valuable.
Could you go through the individual rights?
Oh, yes, I would love to. Okay. You were an attorney, right?
I am an
So
attorney.
oh, still an attorney. I like it. Okay. We have the right to be viewed as capable of changing and growing. We have the right, as do our families and friends, to know about the many pathways to recovery and the nature of addiction. We have the right, whether seeking recovery in the community, a physician's office, treatment center, or while incarcerated, to set our own recovery goals. We have the right to select services that build on our strengths. We have the right to be served by organizations or healthcare and social service providers that view recovery positively. We have the right to be considered as more than a statistic. We have the right to a healthcare and social services system that recognizes the strengths and needs of people with addiction. We have the right to be represented by informed policymakers. We have the right to respectful, non discriminatory care from doctors. We have the right to treatment and recovery support in the criminal justice system. We have the right to speak out publicly about our recovery.
That's great. Guys, we're getting near the end of our time for this episode, but before we leave, I wanted to ask if anyone wanted more information on the Hill Country Council or to reach out for help, what would be the best way for them to do so or the best places for them to go online?
Probably the easiest thing to do is go to akata.org hccada.org. That is our local organization. That's hccada.org. And from the initial page there, they can get contact information. There's a form that they can fill out. They can find a phone number there, which I can't remember off the top of my head. But hccada.org would be the best, quickest way because a real person is going to be on the other end of that phone or that email form and respond to them within, I think we're 24 hours or less. We're usually a lot quicker than that. So it's usually, if they call and they call during business hours, they'll get a hold of a live person right then.
Yes, hccada.org. I've gotten some calls recently from a veterinarian about people struggling with their pets and that being a barrier to treatment for them. And I got to tell a vet about an organization called dogsmatter2.org. So, any question about recovery, treatment, prevention, intervention, basically anything, we're here for.
And I don't ever do this, but I'm just going to add on a personal note. No matter where you are in your life, if you feel like, whatever you feel like, there's help. There's hope, there's help, and there are people in this community who are not only willing, but will run to help you. All you have to do is reach out for that hand. Doesn't matter where you are, no matter what you've done. We love you and we want to help.
Thank you.